Let me get that started. Excellent. All right. So we do have an ombudsperson available. And so you'll see in the users list on the left side of your screen that there's a guest in brackets ombudsperson. So if at any point in time you need that ombudsperson, you can send them a private chat by clicking on the ombudsperson's name. And then the first thing in the menu says start a private chat. So that is there for you. And that is the, sorry, what am I trying to say? The ombudsperson is there because BC TEAL recently ratified the Respectful Interactions Guidelines at the last AGM, and we'll be following these guidelines in the webinar tonight. And at the top of the chat, I posted a link to the Respectful Interactions Guidelines, and actually what I'll do right now is just post that again. Give me a second and I'll just pop that back in there. There we go. So you should be able to see that. And yeah, so if you feel that the guidelines are not being adhered to, please let the ombudsperson know in a private chat. And like I said, all you need to do that is click on the ombudsperson's icon in the users list there and start a private chat. So for tonight, it's very exciting. I'd like to introduce our presenter. So this is Rob McBride. He is from Learn IT to Teach. He's the project manager of administration and communication. He has been the executive director of New Language Solutions since its inception in 1983. He has worked as a teacher, researcher, writer, producer, principally in the settlement language training and adult literacy basic skills sectors. So Rob works on projects where building basic knowledge and skills has the maximum positive impact on work and personal lives of learners. And now I'm going to pass it over to our presenter, Rob. So Rob, let me find you in this list here. And if you're ready, oh, the link is broken. I will post it again in just a second. Give me a moment. Hang on. Actually, Rob, hang on one more second. I'm just going to upload your slides here. There we go. And Rob, you should have the ability to change the slides now. If you don't, just let me know.
Thanks, Beth. Can people hear me?
Yep.
Oh, terrific. Thanks so much for the introduction, Beth. And good evening, everybody. Thanks for taking time from your busy evenings to participate in this webinar. It's my pleasure to present some ideas for you and stimulate some discussion and thought. I see there are many BC TEALers there, which is great, and I also see nice representation from other parts of the country. So welcome all. The title of this webinar is Learning Tech Innovation in the Settlement Language Training Sector. That title captures a wide range of materials from smart boards to massive open online courses. But I'm going to focus on the most important innovation available to most of us in our sectors. That's blended learning. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about what is blended learning, why blended learning and flexible delivery are great innovations for our sector, for our classrooms. The results of a study done in 2016 to 18 on the impact of blended learning on Linc learners and teachers. The Learn IT to Teach vision for the settlement language training sector. I'm going to give you a snapshot of the project's current impact 10 years into its inception. And I'd like to talk briefly about the role of leadership and innovations theories in technology innovation. And I'd like to present some ideas for a roadmap for learning technology in the settlement language training sector. So if we can manage this technically, let's start with a little poll. Do you teach or work with adult immigrants to Canada? And now I'll pause for a second and give people a chance to respond. And Beth, I think you'll have to tell me the results. I don't think I'll be able to see them myself.
Yep, they're just coming in. And yeah, so that's probably pretty good now. How about that? Can you see
terrific.
the results? There they go.
Okay, well, 88% of us are working in the sector. 2 of us know, but everybody's welcome. That's great. And now another little poll. Do you teach or work with adult immigrants to Canada? Oh, I'm pausing again.
Yeah, just pause another second here.
Great. Okay, so we're working with immigrants, almost all of us, so that puts us on the same page pretty much. And finally, if I can manage it.
Oh, how about that one?
Oops. And one more. Do you or your language training program currently use blended learning? That's great. So 83% answered yes, 3 no. Interesting to have everybody around the table. Now we all have a pretty good snapshot of who's here tonight. That's great. I am speaking to mainly to settlement language training professionals, but I think what I'm saying will have some relevance to other ELT teachers. So let's talk a little bit about the stakeholders. Beginning with learners. Learners need better access to settlement language training, assessment and referral, on-site childcare, transportation subsidies, rolling intake, and professional Tehsil excellence only go so far. With so many family and work challenges, many learners are unable to sign up for or stick to the traditional face-to-face classroom model. The internet and information technology can be leveraged to create more flexible and responsive program models that can lower barriers to participation and increase the reach of Linc and other language training courses. So learners want information technology integrated with their learning because it can be available anytime, anywhere there's an internet connection. Information technology gives teaching more impact, and becoming skilled with information technology is essential to adapting to life and work in Canada. Most learners today have smartphones or access to computers or tablets. Many are very skilled with IT and are looking for ways that can be put to work to improve their language and settlement skills. Now let's talk a bit about teachers. Teachers who integrate learning technology knows that it gives their teaching more impact, improves language training incomes, and serves the needs of learners whose busy daily lives are barriers to attending 100% face-to-face classes. And then service provider organizations, otherwise known as SPOs. There are about between 250 and 300 Linc SPOs across Canada. Composed of school boards, community colleges, or community organizations, I should say, and colleges that provide Linc and strive to provide high-quality language training that is accountable and has high service standards. And finally, funders. Like IRCC, want the most bang for their funding bucks. They want the best training for immigrant clients, and they don't like service gaps that discriminate against those with barriers to attending face-to-face classes. We have a team of researchers always looking for evidence and research around blended learning. Several years ago, they identified a gap in the literature. Nobody had really taken a deep dive on the impact of blended learning in settlement language training. 3 team evaluators set out to correct that in late 2016. They carried out a demonstration project, basically an analysis of a potential solution at work in real-world conditions. The results were just published a couple of months ago on our web portal, that's learnit2teach.ca, and are available for any of you to download either the executive summary or the whole report. But tonight I'm going to take a look at some of the results. So our evaluators set out to analyze the impacts of linked blended learning on language outcomes and learner efficacy. There were 45 student participants. They were at the Linc 6-7 CLB levels. There were 3 teachers. We used a range of instruments consisting of entrance and exit language proficiency tests, interviews with teachers and learners, and surveys with teachers and learners. Let's review the researchers' conclusions. The major recurring themes related to the effects of blended learning to students and learning were high levels of engagement and participation in linked blended learning classes, improved attendance and high interest in linked classes and programs, and satisfaction with blended learning, linked classes, and the program generally, increased use of English and ease in using English in pursuing settlement goals, enhanced access to technology and increases in use of technology for learning English, improved English language skills for listening and speaking as well as reading and writing, improved opportunities for interaction and decreased sense of isolation. They developed social and learning connections with community and school. These benefits were expressed repeatedly by students and teachers. And going on to some other conclusions of the researchers, the anxiety level of learners was lowered, and because students engage online in more thoughtful discussions, they have time to rehearse and craft their responses. Students developing multimodal literacy skills, that is not just print, but of course using technology devices. And blended learning builds and expands computer literacy, digital literacy, and real-world skills. And blended learning supports learner autonomy and self-reflection. And continuing, students completed most individual activities online, leaving time for communication and interaction when face-to-face. And I'm going to digress for a second and review the flipped language learning model and how it can apply to settlement language training. The flip model, many of you will be familiar with. It advocates that the instructional component of teaching take place online and in preparation for attending face-to-face class. And the result is that learners come to class having been coached, as it were, by online materials and having practice opportunities online before they arrive in class. So the result is students become much better prepared to learn and interact with the teacher and their classmates. Students have more choice in terms of how they learn, and blended learning resulted in more personalized learning. It increases motivation when topics and tasks are relevant to students' lives and engaging. And blended learning can accommodate a variety of learning styles. And my last slide, covering the conclusions of the report. Blended learning supports diverse needs of students' lives and schedules, allows students at higher levels to continue to study by choice, and improves attendance, engagement, and retention. Blended learning supports the teacher, and those of you who are already using a learning management system, I'm probably preaching to the converted, because we understand how a learning management system can support communication between and among teachers and learners. And blended learning expands access to knowledge and information for students and teachers. That could be, for example, in the case of Vancouver, access to local websites with community information and news sites and other ways of networking and building communication with the rest of the world through devices. And blended learning eases independence and the transition out of Linc 8 by building a resource base for practice outside of the classroom. In other words, it helps prepare learners to be more autonomous in their learning and more independent in the world. So just to summarize, now lots of you are probably thinking it's hard to get from where you are, struggling to implement PBLA, for example, wondering how to deal with weak internet connections, the lack of hardware, and just not needing one more thing to worry about. But lots of your fellow language training professionals have dealt with the same landscape and innovated with blended learning anyway. And I haven't heard one of them say they made a mistake and would go back to more traditional teaching. Over the lifespan of this project, we've seen constant improvement in the blended learning tools we all rely on to build the learner courseware. They have steadily become easier to use and more useful. The EduLink Learner Courseware is based in Moodle, one of the world's leading learning management system solutions. And through Moodle, we are able to provide communication and training tools that support all 4 skills. And since the mandating of PBLA in 2013, we've been working to align the learning content so it supports PBLA learning and assessment. Okay, let's pause a bit. I'll zip up and ask you please to respond to another poll. Do you think blended learning improves language and settlement outcomes for your learners?
Hang on just a second. Gotta publish that poll. One more second. There we go.
Thanks, Beth. Oh, well, I am preaching to the choir, apparently. That's terrific. I guess when we talk a little later about innovation series, I'd like to circle back on your support for blended learning and talk about how you can advance local innovations in your programs. So 95% yes and 1 no. Okay. Let's try and convince that one holdout before we finish up tonight. Okay, so now I'm going to zero in on the Learn IT to Teach project. We began work in 2010 in the Ontario region of what was CIC at the time. Now it's IRCC. In 2013, we got a national mandate from IRCC to support blended learning across the country. And the main components of the project are the portal, learnittoteach.ca, where you'll find lots of news, resources, leadership materials, and annotated bibliography with links to our research articles on blended learning and learning technology and language training generally, and of course general information about who's on the Learn IT to Teach team and what kinds of things we do, brochures, reports, etc. Then the other next component, the middle one in the bottom on your screen there, the Linc Courseware, which is software aligned to a specific curriculum. At edulinc.org, we have Linc 1 to 8 courses, and they are, as I said earlier, 4 skill courses we support listening and speaking to. And our developers are constantly improving and augmenting the courseware. The courseware is now enabled for mobile devices as well as computers, so you can bypass what might be the ancient desktop computers in the lab, and learners can study anywhere they have an internet connection for their devices, computers, smartphones, or tablets. And we have a wide variety of template courses set up at various CLB levels. There's about 40 of them. So once you get through the initial steps in our training, and I'll describe the training in a minute, you will be given a course at an appropriate CLB level for your learners. And then finally on the bottom right, you'll see learnittoteach.org, which is another site in our little menu of sites. And it has, learnittoteach.org is where we do the instructor training that I will describe a little further on. So on this side, you can see how the interlocking resources on which the Learner Courseware is based work with each other. In the beginning were the Linc curriculum guidelines and the Canadian language benchmarks. The real foundation for Linc was laid in 2007-9 with the development of the Linc activities books, with which some of you, maybe most of you, will be familiar with. At this time, learning objects, discrete skill-building units of e-learning, were developed for most of the activities in the books. The Linc activities books were, of course, skill-building, not task-based learning, which are required to make portfolio-based language assessment possible. So beginning in 2014, while we revisited the learning objects to modernize the underlying technology, we also began adapting the learning objects to support PBLA. Today, there are several hundred learning objects at CLB levels 1 to 7 available for Linc teachers, and that collection is expanding all the time, not just based on our own development, but also based on contributions from other service providers in the sector. So the teacher training options. I should have stuck a poll question in here to ask who's already started the Learn IT to Teach training, but I'll just start by explaining that all of this is free for Linc professionals and programs. We host the courseware and the learning objects. We also provide live help in the form of a synchronous chat to professionals encountering any technical or pedagogical issues. And we provide 4 stages of teacher professional development, all free and supported by our expert Tehsil mentors and educational technologists. So stage 1, which normally takes place face-to-face, takes 2.5 hours. It is basically a 2.5 hour introduction to the project, but also to allow teachers to experience the Linc courseware from the learner's point of view, so you get a sense of what a learner sees and how they participate. Pre-stage 2 takes place online and takes about 2 hours. And it's basically just enough, gives you, the teacher, just enough skills with Moodle to begin using the courseware with their learners. Then stage 2 itself takes about 8 to 10 hours. It's online and mentored by a Tehsil professional. And it is a review of basic editing skills and good teaching principles for the language training teacher. Stage 3, also online and mentored, is advanced Moodle editing. And by editing, I mean more than what you might think by that term. I mean, editing to us means taking greater control of the features and functions within Moodle. And stage 3 also covers best practices in blended learning. And it takes a significant amount of time. It's 25 hours. By the way, all of these stages are lead to a certificate upon completion. And for those of you who might be in Ontario, stages 3 and 4 are PTCT certified by Tehsil, Ontario. In other words, they are a recognized professional credential. And then stage 4, which is not for everybody, is really about learning to create your own e-materials. Takes about 35 hours, and as part of completing it, you're required to produce a learning object, upload it to Tutela, and share it with other Tehsil professionals. Where'd my slide go? 18. Oh, there we go. There's a 5th stage, recognizing a gap in the training a few years ago. Since 2015, the project has offered a 5th stage of training, learning technology, innovation, leadership. The course has 12 units that take a week each and about 2 hours each. And it all takes place online in Moodle. It's designed for managers or aspiring lead teachers. So if you're interested in that, I'll put my contact information in the chat when we get near the end. So cohorts of managers or lead teachers are guided through an orientation to the Linc Learner Courseware, the teacher training, and information and resources about creating local conditions to facilitate innovation with learning technology and how to provide local leadership. Like the teacher training, evaluation of this leadership course has been very positive. Since the participants go through the course together, their interaction with each other has provided useful lessons on opportunities, challenges, and barriers to innovation in the settlement language training sector. In other words, this course is kind of more than the sum of its parts because of the participation of professionals from the sector who bring their own thoughts, reflections, and perspectives to the course. So, we are constantly augmenting, improving, enhancing what we offer. We do that through a careful evaluation and consultation with our clients, and some of the courseware updates over the last few years are bullet points on this slide. The most important update to the courseware recently has been upgrading it so it's available for mobile devices. This allows learners easier access using their own devices. Another important upgrade to the courseware has been the addition of the PBLA section. This section provides ready-made tools for needs assessment, goal setting, self-reflection, activities to introduce the language companion and PBLA, as well as a simple e-portfolio solution. We've expanded the number of multi-level courses based on need, and we continue to update learner support resources as we add new activities to the courseware. And then looking ahead, we will be implementing an attendance plugin to record learner attendance when using the courseware. So that leads to the possibility that learners can be credited as attending even when they're participating in the course off-site in their own homes or a coffee shop or whatever. So what's in the pipe? Some of you may have already heard rumblings about a national learning management system solution. We at New Language Solutions are carrying the can on that one in collaboration with other national projects. On April 1st, 2020, we're going to be launching Avenue.ca. Avenue.ca will be a replacement for EduLink in some way. It'll be available for both English and French second language teaching. It'll have online attendance tracking. It'll have more flexible delivery options. For example, we're intending to make it available for online learning as well as blended. It'll have PBLA compatible modules developed by the Center for Benchmarks, Learn IT to Teach, and other organizations. It'll realign the courseware with new national curriculum guidelines that are also in the pipe. And it'll have integration with Tutela such that just one login will be required. And there'll be seamless communication between Tutela and Avenue.ca such that teachers can directly go into Tutela to gather learning resources and import them into their courses. Teachers will also have their own personal resource areas where they can keep favored materials, kind of like the e-learning equivalent of a bookshelf or a filing cabinet. It will have a courseware builder so that teachers can custom construct their courses, and it'll have a fully functional electronic portfolio solution. So, have all Linc programs transitioned to Linc Blended Learning? Well, the answer is not yet. Last year, we completed a project impact report to analyze how the sector is innovating. There are clearly pockets of excellence represented by whole programs that have taken up the EduLink model or instituted their own blended learning models locally. And there are other programs which have only taken the first baby steps, sometimes just a teacher or two going through pre-stage 2 and putting the courseware to work. Now, the different mandates of PBLA and Learn IT to Teach can partly explain delays by some sector professionals, as they've been concentrating to realize the benefits of PBLA locally. Maybe they're deferring blended learning innovation to a future date. However, the result for learners of delaying is continuing barriers to online learning. Many newcomers struggle to balance their communication needs with low incomes, family responsibilities, and entry-level employment. Online learning is part of the Linc solution to program access, waiting lists, and the day-to-day struggles of newcomers to communicate in English. So here's a graph that's taken from that project impact report I described. We can see that instructors had wide access to a wide variety of technology. So it's not generally lack of technology that's holding people back. People have internet or Wi-Fi access in schools. They have CD players, and many have teacher-dedicated computers in the classroom. While more than 2/3 had access to a computer lab, less than 1/3 had computers in the classroom or on wheels. But many instructors are comfortable using technology. Over 3/4 use word processing tools, email, or other online tools to communicate, and they access websites to accompany classroom materials. Less than 1/4, though, use an organizational learning management system, like Moodle, to deliver learning content, and less than a tenth use the full spectrum of Web 2.0 tools. But only 5% reported that they struggle with basic technology-related activities. So I'm going to step sideways a little bit and talk about our project vision. We want a newcomer population with ready access to information technology to assist their orientation, adaptation, to support the development of their second language skills, and help them build IT foundation skills that will improve their employability and life skills. And we want to see a Canadian community of professional teaching practice in the field of technology-enhanced language learning and immigrant settlement language training, where we all freely share resources we've developed, and as language educators, we collaborate to identify, sustain, and improve better practices. And we want to see language educators understand the potential of technology-enhanced language learning to support learning and teaching, and where skill with learning technology is a basic professional requirement. So, innovations theory. This has been inspirational to us since the beginning of the project. The late guru of innovations theory was Everett M. Rogers. He argued that innovation in education takes a long time, up to 20 years. Based on that, I estimate that we are about 15 years in, because learning management systems really emerged and became available about 2000, 2001. So the big question is, will blended learning be operating across the sector in 5 years? The answer is a big maybe from my perspective. I hope so. The slide diagrams the roles of various actors in the innovation process as identified by Everett M. Rogers. The first to innovate are, of course, in the bottom left, the innovators. Now, those people might be characterized as people who always think an innovation is a good idea. But there's a second wave represented by the early adopters who are perhaps more influential. They tend to be more skeptical and cautious, and I think people should innovate thoughtfully and cautiously. And the result is they're more influential on their peers because they're recognized as people who do things more carefully and thoughtfully. Then the critical mass that Rogers describes happens when those first two sets of adopters, innovators, influence the early majority to innovate. And then you have momentum for change. And you finally influence the late majority, and even finally that little piece of pie on the right, the laggards, to innovate. So I encourage all of you to think about where your programs are at on this graph, and how your progress to innovate for blended learning would be reflected if you did a graph like that. What point are you at? And finally, questions, please. I'm looking forward to hearing some feedback and your reflections and any issues that come up.
Hi, Rob. This is Beth again. I'm going to put my webcam on just so that people know that I'm here and I'm still here. And it looks like there's a couple of questions coming in on the chat. So Edith says, can volunteers with Linc be part of the training?
Great question, Edith. Thank you. My answer has two parts. One is generally yes. but it's somewhat unusual. But we may have a solution for you. There was a special projects initiative by IRCC 2 years ago called SDI, System Delivery Improvements. These were kind of one-off projects, and New Language Solutions made an application and a proposal for one called Tehsil Basics for Language Volunteers. That is currently unavailable, but I'm hoping by April 1st we'll be able to open it up. And it's an online course mentored by Tehsil professionals that coaches volunteers and gives them some basic language training skills to better equip them to be teachers' aides or run a conversation circle. So the short answer is I'm not sure if the teacher training is the right thing for a volunteer, but I think we do have a solution in the pipe.
Great.
Shall I just, yeah.
Do you want to just go ahead and address each of the questions, or the only one that came up earlier was Sharam's question, actually comment that she did 2 stages but stopped due to PBLA. Not sure if that's a question, but maybe you can comment on it.
Yeah. Thanks for getting started, Sharam. I understand the frustration. PBLA is sucking up a lot of the oxygen in the sector. I support it, but I think I know our plan is that we are continually working to better support PBLA so that, in effect, one hand washes the other. And I'm hoping that within the next year or two, more and more teachers will come to see that one hand washes the other, and PBLA and blended learning are complementary, not competitive for teachers' time. So I'll move on to Anne's question. Is Avenue.ca going to replace Linc Home Study? No, Anne. The intention is that New Language Solutions are the charity I work for and operate. We really regard ourselves as a service provider to other service providers. So we do provide courses that teachers and students participate in, but we don't do direct teaching ourselves. And we're also a service provider to service providers like Linc Home Study. So I think you can anticipate that Linc Home Study may be migrating to Moodle and to Avenue.ca eventually. It's not an either-or situation. Janice, will you offer training for students as well, how to study online? We do have a lot of learner supports and digital citizenship, online learning are supported within Moodle. There are plenty of resources that do support learners, because we recognize that learning to learn online is a skill in its own right. And Janice, any sneak peeks of Avenue.ca before April 1? Not sure, Janice. We're going to be piloting it towards the end of this calendar year and before April 1st. So if you happen to have access to the piloting, the answer is yes, but otherwise, no.
There's a few more questions looking like they're coming soon.
Good. Gives me a chance to get a drink of water. I see a lot of typing going on.
There's a question there now from Karina.
Oh, okay.
Can you see it?
Yes. How are you making the courseware more interactive or engaging versus being modeled after worksheet-like activities? That's a tough one because I think the courseware is very engaging generally. We're constantly working to improve it, but through programs like or applications like H5P, we do create highly interactive, engaging. The learning objects I referred to earlier are just like that. So I think that's the answer, Karina. And Bobby, what about new TESOL graduates who are wanting to work in this sector? I'm a volunteer in a Linc program. Oh, okay, Bobby. That's an interesting question. If you can get, you can send me an email, and here I'm just going to. I'm posting my email now. If you can send me an email, then I'll send you a link to a form online where your Linc supervisor would need to request training for you. I don't see a serious problem. If you're a Tehsil graduate and you're also involved in a Linc program, I don't see a major barrier to participating. And you're welcome, Sharam. Does anybody care that we've got some time here? Does anybody have any reflections on blended learning in Linc that they'd like to share?
I'm going to have to wait a moment while everybody types.
Good. I can hear those keyboards getting heated up.
So Sharam says, I like to do blended learning, but the SPO and the city seem reluctant for it now.
Oh, really? Yeah, well, that goes to the question of leadership right there, doesn't it? And when I say leadership, I'm very much a fan of distributed leadership, where it's not the shining hero on the horse that leads everybody, but rather leadership begins with each one of us individually. So teachers can be leaders for sure. Just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're a leader. Managers manage, leaders do other things as well. Learners can be leaders. They can be pulling learning technology as much as anybody's pushing it at them.
And then, yeah, Jocelyn says some students are so used to the classroom that they feel disconnected with blended learning. But then Patricia says 99% of our blended students don't want to go back to all face-to-face ever. So lots of different experiences there.
Yeah, I think, there's learners can be reluctant, but I think generally speaking, they're big fans because they're learning to connect to the wider world when they're engaged in blended learning. Naturally, many of them already have internet skills and IT skills, but those that don't, that's a kind of isolation in its own right today. We all depend on the computer and smart devices to do a lot for us, to source information, to communicate with others. Among immigrants, for example, Nadia Kaidi at the University of Toronto, she works in informatics, and she's done a lot of research and publishing around the importance of adaptive networks for immigrants to successfully settle, where, for example, an Iranian landing in Victoria can reach out to the other Iranians in that community or anywhere in Canada and gather a lot of useful information. So enabling that kind of communication interaction is a very useful byproduct of blended learning.
And as Bonnie mentioned, I think we do our students a disservice if we don't give them the tools and resources to fully participate in the digital world. Blended learning can teach newcomers important transferable skills. And I agree with that, actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it is a disservice not to help them engage with information technology. I mean, it's part of almost any profession or trade that you can mention is skill with technology. Jocelyn, we have different, I think we need to leverage the knowledge and skills students already have, Facebook, web chat, and show them how these same skills can be used to help them be successful autonomous learners in their new country. Yeah, right on, right on.
Yeah, and similar to what Anne said earlier, so blended is a great idea because besides language, they need to have computer skills to live in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm advocating for the new curriculum guidelines to be grounded at least partly in digital skills. I think it's that important to anybody trying to live and work in Canada today, even to support your children in their education and development. Wow, this chat box is a gold mine. One student reported, "This way is more respectful of me. The autonomy, I think, is the draw." So yes, we see a preference for blended, even those who are from face-to-face teacher-controlled background, including students who were pretty reluctant in the first place. Interesting, yeah. And learners can be leaders in the classroom, even for a teacher who's not terribly comfortable with technology. You can find learners in the classroom who can be a technology resource in their own right, and that's engaging for them and useful for them in terms of their language and skill development. Well, Sharam has a very good question here. This comment is to all participants here in my SPO in the last Linc meeting, the concept of how much time we should spend with learners outside class, and there was no answer. What are your thoughts? This is an interesting question because it goes to how IRCC officers are regulating programs. Some, I understand, are allowing a lot of latitude to consider online participation as actual attendance time. In other words, the learners don't necessarily have to be in the classroom to be considered attending. And I think this is precisely the kind of flexibility that's needed to make blended learning most useful and most impactful. So I'm kind of working at my end to encourage the department to standardize that policy. I have heard of IRCC officers kind of going backwards on that question. So it's a complicated issue, and I hope it gets resolved in favor of more flexibility. Bonnie, I don't think the blended. Oh, good comment, Bonnie. It shouldn't add to your workload. But people, I know I'm talking to a lot of people who already use an LMS. And my experience when I started using it, about 18 years ago now, was how liberating it was. The first time I set up a course, it was quite a bit of work, partly because I was building my own skill with the learning management system. But then the second time I rolled out that course, it just took a bit of tweaking, and everything I needed was already there, and I tweaked it for a new group. So I think there's an extra upfront demand on teachers' time, but I think that gets balanced out when you roll out the course over and over again. Janice, I think teachers should be paid for the hours they work online with their students. I totally agree. So does Bonnie. Well, I noticed we're getting near the end of our hour. I want to extend a deep thanks to Beth Konomoto and Jamie Evoy for setting up this session, and to BC TEAL for your help, and thank you all for participating. I hope I've inspired your innovation with blended learning, or give you renewed inspiration. Let's hope that soon everybody kind of gets the point and moves ahead, and we serve our learners in the best way we can.
Great, thank you so much, Rob. There was lots of good information in there, and I think it'll allow people to have conversations and look a little bit more into it. So that's really useful and helpful.
Terrific, and it will probably be at a conference near you in the next 12 months. So, if so, please drop by the exhibit table and chat with us. Wonderful.
And if you can see the last slide that I've just put up here, so thank you for attending the BC TEAL webinar, and thank you to Rob for all that great information and beautiful slides. The next webinar will be on December 11th at 7 p.m. With, actually that should say BC TEAL, not SBC TEAL, Owen Scott Roy Douglas. And in very small print there, it says, in fostering scholarship, the role of the BC TEAL journal. That's what he's going to be talking about, and how you can get involved with that. So stay tuned for registration details for that. And that's about it for tonight. So you can hang around for another 2 minutes, and then we're going to be closing the webinar.
Thanks, Beth. I think that's all.
I think it is too. And now it's time for me to go finish my dinner.
And it's time.
Thank you for staying up so late.
My pleasure. It was a very engaging session. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I hope to talk to you soon.
Bye. You too.
Bye-bye.